Hello, and welcome to Hallow, and the first installment of Confessions and Conversations. My name is Shayne Smith, and I am so excited to go through St. Augustine's Confessions with you. For each of these conversations, Father Gregory Pine will be our guide as we discuss the themes of each week and dive into the rich spiritual insights of St. Augustine. Father Gregory Pine, I'm so excited to be here with you.
I'm delighted to be here with you.
Let's start with the most obvious question. Who is Father Augustine?
That's a good question, but I don't actually know who you're referring to. If you had said St. Augustine, I would know that it was a saint who lived in the 4th and 5th century.
Who was a father.
Who also was a father. He was a priest. People forget that, you know. He was a monk, a priest, a bishop.
Now we're getting into it.
Yeah, exactly. He was a man of many insights. So I think, for folks at home, maybe the simplest explanation is to say that he is known as the Doctor of Grace, because he made huge contributions to the church's, to Christians' understanding of how God is at work in our life. He's the father of the church, most often cited in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. So he's kind of like a cornerstone of our understanding of the church's teaching, our approach to the spiritual life.
Okay. He sounds important.
He is important. Yeah, I'd say like super important, somewhere between super important and super duper important. I try to reserve super duper for the scriptures, because it's a technical kind of classification that seems scriptural in its nature. But yeah, he's really important.
Where does Aquinas fall on the super duper scale?
Yeah, so he's also super important. And he's the guy who is cited next most often in the Catechism. Like the ecclesiastical writer cited next most often in the Catechism. Who do you think is cited third most often?
St. Francis?
Yeah, I actually don't know.
You were leaning on me there.
I was hoping you did.
Why should we care so much about someone who lived so long ago in such a different time says? How does what he says and taught and did apply to me in my life where I'm struggling with like sins related to Instagram?
Right, sure. Yeah. And the rabid consumption of nicotine pouches.
Yes.
These are the things that did not vex St. Augustine, so how can he possibly have insights that pertain to our lives?
Exactly. Our modern lives that feel so foreign to these saints and these heroes of the church and the Christian tradition from so long ago.
Yeah.
Like, he was worried about the Huns, I presume. Or whatever. How can I relate to that?
How can you relate to that? It's a tremendous question. So I think first thing we can say is Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So if the Lord is speaking to someone in the past, we at present can learn from that conversation. Because truth be told, we're participants in the same conversation. And also some people are better at responding to that offer of divine life. And the saints are the best. They're the absolute best at responding generously to God's offer of divine life. And not only did St. Augustine respond generously, but he also narrates it. He tells us about the steps in that process. A lot of people, when they recount their vocation story, they've kind of forgotten, actually, what God has done in their lives. They're I was, doing bad stuff, and then, this thing happened, and I was doing good stuff.
Yes.
But, what about the transition? St. Augustine spends an incredible amount of time thinking specifically about the transition, which kind of helps us to get into the inner workings of our hearts. I don't know, do you, when you recount your vocation story, do you find that you change how you tell it depending upon the audience or depending upon...
You know what? I don't.
Oh, really?
Which is funny because I actually have been telling my confessions.
Yeah, your confessions.
My confessions, quite literally, I made my conversion into a comedy act.
Let's go.
Which is very difficult and weird, but so much of my conversion is I got baptized and I thought I'd have superpowers.
Oh, yeah?
I've done it. I'm Christian now. Easy road. False. It actually gets more difficult as you go.
Yeah.
And talking about my response to grace and how I was resistant at first and things like that. And so I find there's interesting parallels here.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, I relate.
So St. Augustine then, I suppose where my leading question was headed was we don't actually know what's going on in our lives.
Yeah.
But maybe you do know what's going on in your life.
Certainly not.
Oh, okay, cool. Perfect. Then we have a sweet point of contact here.
Yeah.
So to be in conversation with other people who have thought about this, who have prayed through this, is often very fruitful and helpful because, somebody gives you a vocabulary and a grammar to discuss conversion, and then you're like, holy smokes, that's exactly what's going on, or something darn like that is going on. So I think St. Augustine, he's one of the first to describe his conversion story in a really rich, interpersonal, autobiographical way. And so a lot of people still find it super, super pertinent. Some people are like, old, boring.
Yeah, yeah.
But those people usually commit the same errors that everyone in the history of the world have committed. So if we're interested in maybe like committing fewer of them, not that that's the goal is to be like God, but yeah, we could profit from St. Augustine.
Yeah, I find that conversion is this rich tapestry of experiences, and the more people so deeply want to see themselves in someone else's conversion.
Yeah.
And so my conversion has been incredibly fruitful for, what do I want to say, weirdos?
Yeah.
And I do get a lot of messages from those people whereas sometimes I'm like, you should speak to a priest or a spiritual director or someone who knows more, but they see themselves in me and it's a safe place.
Yeah.
And if Shayne can do it, I can do it. So it sounds like St. Augustine has this sort of, oh my gosh, I see myself in him.
Yeah.
And so then if I see myself in him and he's a saint, then I see myself on a pathhood to sainthood, or a path to sainthood.
No.
Pathhood isn't necessarily a word, though it could be.
Exactly.
If we get it going.
Okay. So it's like fetch. You just got to spread it.
Yes.
Yes. So I think that a lot of this comes down to finding our place in the mystical body, in the sense that God wants us all to be in his body. He wants us all to be part of his church. But sometimes we find it difficult to be where it is that he wants us to be, because it doesn't seem like we fit, or it wasn't what we imagined for ourselves. But when you see other people testify to how beautiful it is to find your place in the body, again, that reveals the possibility, kind of uncovers the possibility of blessed life. Because people are afraid of different things when they're confronted by the gospel. They're like, yikes, rank conformity.
Yeah.
Or like, yikes, zero fun. Or like, yikes, lots of rules. Many people say yikes for different reasons. When you see St. Augustine, he did all kinds of stuff. And you're like, wowzers.
Yeah.
So St. Augustine can give you encouragement along that line. I mean, like, the way that you describe your conversion, it sounds like since you have converted, you've been pretty pleased with your decision. Dare I say,
Yes.
Yeah, overjoyed.
Overjoyed, yeah. Fulfilled.
Respect.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily that I'm happier or less burdened, but I think it's that it's joyful.
Yeah.
And I've kind of separated the two things. I also think that the direction and the really the love of God, just like knowing like, oh, everything has a purpose. I have answers to questions. I know where I'm going and how to get there, which is something that you think you have, but you don't have outside of Christ. And so I was so far gone, but so convinced in my ignorance that I was doing the right thing and that I was very much on the correct path. And you're so convinced that you're on the path that you have all these problems in your life and all these deep insecurities and fears and depressions and this sort of like weighing sense of dread on you all the time. And you're like, well, this must be some external thing. This has nothing to do with my internal life or the choices I'm making. It's everyone else. And so in coming into the church and in seeking Christ and participating in the sacraments and doing all that, it's not necessarily that I'm like, that things get easier, because the church is, being a Christian is not easy, which is kind of the point, or part of it anyway, maybe. I think we're called to do work and suffer and all these other things, but like that sort of undercurrent in my life of joy and purpose and meaning has done something so different that it's interesting. It's interesting to be sad, but to feel joy. Do you know what I mean?
I do. I might use different language because, I think that, my experience of like pain or sadness is bad thing, very much present. Whereas my experience of joy or pleasure is like good thing, very much present. And it's hard kind of in my mind or in my heart to hold those two things together. But what I do have an experience of is like pain or sadness, like bad thing, very much present. And yet a kind of understanding that this is where I'm supposed to be. Like, maybe it's like you have to grieve something, you have to mourn something, you have to undergo a period where you're being detached from something so that you can be attached to God or whatever it is. So I can like look at the thing and say, ooh, this is unpleasant. Nevertheless, I wouldn't be anywhere else. Whereas I think like maybe the differentiation that you're making between, sadness and joy is one that I would make between like being where you ought to be and not being where you ought to be. Well, I reverse those, but you get the idea.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. It's sort of that, and then also I think the Christian life is full of wonder. Mm-hmm. And so I went from living a life where I was sort of just like going from thing to thing and experiencing things in a very material way to like a life is an adventure and it's full of wonderment. And which is a word, yes?
But yeah.
I've done it.
Yeah.
And so, and it's just like, it's exciting in a way that it wasn't before. And there's this sort of, this beauty that is unveiled in things that wasn't there before. And it's kind of like breaking down on the side of the road with someone you don't like is a chore. Breaking down on the side of the road with your friends is hilarious, and it's this sort of like I'm broken down on the side of the road with Christ sometimes, and it's just very funny and it's a good time and we laugh and it's an adventure. Whereas before I was broken down on the side of the road by myself. And it was just sort of like this chore.
Yeah.
And I'm just so glad to have Christ in the car, pumping jams, being silly, making a joke, and knowing in my heart of hearts, like, oh, I've broken down and we're on the side of the road and we're going to miss the thing. And this is a huge inconvenience in my life. But also in the future, like, how fun will it be to recount this story? Mm-hmm. There's that sort of knowledge of the adventure going to pay off.
It reminds me of a Rascal Flatts song.
Okay.
God bless the broken road that led me straight to you. That's what I would sing if I were good at singing. So those things being tenuously related, I feel like that just affords us infinite opportunities for further exploration.
So St. Augustine wrote Confessions.
That was the best transition I've ever heard in my whole life. Yeah. So St. Augustine wrote the Confessions between, folks will know this from some of the commentary from Chris and from Father Isaiah, but he wrote the Confessions between 397 and 400. Folks will also know that St. Augustine died in 430. So it's not an autobiography in like the strict sense because it's like a partial memoir more than anything else.
Yeah.
But it's 13 books which tell the story of his conversion, all right, which effectively tell the story of how he was born. He recounts memories that he had as an infant, which is kind of wild. And then adolescence, and then young adulthood, and then, on his way to the Christian church up until the age of whatever it was, maybe 45. Mm-hmm. So the first 9 books are like narratively shaped, and then the last 4 books are a wild exploration of philosophical themes that most people give up on. And I think that Hallow has anticipated that and shaped their challenge accordingly.
Okay, one more question before we end this part. I'm curious. So, what is the significance of Saint Michael in our battle against sin? Is he given that job?
So, main thing to say at the outset is that good and evil aren't equal. So good is way, way bigger, better, stronger than evil.
Evil is a privation of the good.
Bingo. You know who said that first?
Was it St. Augustine?
Yeah.
No way!
Exactly. Nice work. Made that sweet theological connection. Yeah. So evil is just a conspicuous lack of the good, but it's like a parasite. It feeds on a host, and that host is goodness. So it's not like the Force, when you hear in Star Wars, like these things need to be balanced. They don't need to be balanced.
Yes.
No need for evil, at least not moral evil of the sort that we introduce with sin and vice. So God's got us, and he needs no help in securing our salvation. But the fact of the matter is that he's generous, and he likes to involve people in the work of salvation so as to bless them. And he involves angels, and he involves saints, and he involves us in some limited fashion. So the fact of the matter is that the angels have been entrusted with the care of us human beings, guardian angels in a special way, and then other angels in other ways. The highest of angels, they're mostly just thinking about worship. The lowest of angels, they're also thinking about worship, but they're also thinking about like custody or stewardship of us. Mm-hmm. So one rank up from guardian angels are archangels, and St. Michael has been entrusted with the care of those heavenly hosts.
So cool.
Yeah, exactly. And the idea is an expression of God's generosity and as a way by which to bless him and to bless us. So he plays the role assigned to him by God in this fight against evil, which doesn't stand a chance because Christ has secured the victory. But it still remains for us to like lay claim to that victory.
Yeah.
That is to say, make the victory ours by saying yes, at the very least, like this may as well happen, or perhaps more robustly, amen, alleluia, party on, whatever it is that you say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. I like that. A friend of mine, someone I know very well, once told me God implicates us all in the plan of salvation.
That's true.
Which is very beautiful, something I think about all the time. If only I could remember who that was. So, yeah.
Well, here's another St. Augustine one. St. Augustine says, the God who created you without you will not save you without you.
Okay. Wow.
So he's just getting us involved.
I like that quite a bit. I also like heaven is available to those who take it by force.
Nice.
I think about that all the time.
There you go.
And I know that can be misunderstood very easily. Can you unmisunderstand that for anyone here who hears that and is like, what do you mean take heaven by force? Like muscle your way in? What does that mean?
So violence is opposed to nature or natural movement. And it's a kind of natural movement to indulge in lower goods. It's like everybody wants Chex Muddy Buddies. Everybody wants Sour Patch Kids. Everybody wants a potentially infinite supply of Diet Coke. Everybody wants all the goods.
Yes.
Right? But sometimes we need be violent. That is to say, we need deny ourselves certain of those goods. And it ends up that movement of temperance or of fortitude ends up being far more natural because it helps create the space for the life of reason to flourish. It clears our heads and we can start thinking aright as we ought to think. So like St. Augustine, for instance, he struggled with lust for quite a while. But once he began to get a hold of those lower desires, it created space in him for thinking about God and choosing God. So we need to exercise a certain holy violence with respect to our lower appetites, so as to create space for the expression of our higher appetites, greatest among which is our desire for our appetite for God. So I think St. Augustine provides us a cool way of thinking about that, not just that verse, but the spirituality which lies in the background.
Father Gregory, that was great. Thank you so much. What a helpful introduction to what we'll be going through in this St. Michael's Lent. I can't wait to be back with you all and Father Gregory next week. Until then, go be a saint.